The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked toward the porch, the rhythmic jingle of Bella's collar providing the only soundtrack to my afternoon. For 18 months, the sounds I lived by were the staccato of small arms fire and the heavy hum of transport planes. Returning to civilian life was supposed to be about silence, or at least a different kind of noise. I had bought this house at the edge of the community for its solitude. I kept my lawn mown, my shutters painted, and my business to myself. Bella was a 3-year-old golden retriever, a service animal trained to anchor me when the shadows of my deployment started to stretch too long. She was the neighborhood favorite, calm, intuitive, and remarkably gentle. Kids would run across the street just to bury their hands in her fur, and I'd stand there, watching her tail wag with a slow, deliberate rhythm that somehow kept my own pulse steady. But in the eyes of Linda Harper, the president of the Brookside Homeowners Association, our quiet existence was a provocation. Linda was a woman who viewed the neighborhood not as a collection of homes, but as a kingdom that required constant, intrusive management. My refusal to attend the wine and cheese mixers or participate in the performative community spirit meetings was, to her, an act of subversion. When she couldn't find a foothold into my personal life, she took aim at the one thing that mattered most to me: the architecture of a vendetta. It started with observation notices. Linda began leaving slips of paper in my mailbox claiming that neighbors had expressed deep concern regarding a large, unmuzzled animal. I knew the neighbors, I knew their kids by name. I knew the claims were a fabrication. When I confronted Linda at the HOA office, she sat behind a mahogany desk, her smile as sharp and thin as a razor blade. "Mr. Vance, we have a certain vision for Brookside," she said, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle in her blouse. "People moved here for safety. A dog of that size, regardless of its training, creates an atmosphere of unpredictability. It's a violation of community standards." "Show me the standard," I replied, my voice low. "I've read the bylaws cover to cover. There is no restriction on service animals, and no formal complaints have been filed." "The board has discretion over nuisances," she countered. "Consider this an informal warning." 1 week later, the informal turned into a show of force. I was washing my truck when a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into my driveway. A man stepped out, dressed in a black tactical vest with Brookside enforcement velcroed across the chest. He had a radio, a pair of handcuffs, and a visible sidearm. No badge, no department markings, just a man in a costume playing at authority. "I'm Officer Miller," he said, his hand resting near his holster. "I'm here on behalf of the association. We've received reports that this animal is aggressive. You have 48 hours to remove it from the premises or face a $500 daily fine." "You're a private citizen on private property," I told him, the old tactical part of my brain beginning to map out the distance between us. "You have no legal jurisdiction to order a seizure or a removal. Leave." I documented the interaction and sent a formal cease and desist to Linda Harper. I warned her that hiring armed, unlicensed enforcement was a violation of state law. She didn't respond. Instead, she doubled down on her digital paper trail, sending out community-wide emails about dangerous elements and uncooperative residents. The day the silence broke. The violence didn't start with a scream, it started with a single sharp crack that I recognized instantly. I was in the kitchen when the shot rang out. I ran to the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. On the sidewalk, 10 yards from my porch, Bella was lying on her side. Her golden fur was stained a deep, horrifying crimson. She wasn't barking. She was just looking toward the door, her breathing shallow and ragged. Standing 5 feet away was Miller. His weapon was drawn, the muzzle still smoking. "She charged me," he yelled, his voice cracking with a frantic, jittery energy. The dog scared some kids. I had to neutralize the threat. I looked around. There were no kids. There was only the quiet street, a few neighbors peering out from behind curtains, and my dog dying in the dirt. Bella hadn't moved. She was still on the sidewalk where she had been sunning herself. As I moved toward her, Miller swung the muzzle of his gun toward me. "Stay back. I'm still conducting an enforcement action. Get on the ground." The world slowed down. In the military, they call it tachypsychia, the way time dilates during a life-or-death encounter. Miller was unstable, armed, and had already discharged a weapon in a residential zone. He was an active threat. When he stepped toward me, his finger tightening on the trigger, I moved. I didn't think about the HOA, or Linda Harper, or the lawsuits. I thought about survival. I parried the weapon, the metal hot against my palm, and used his own momentum to drive him into the pavement. We struggled for the gun, a frantic, desperate scramble on the concrete. Miller reached for a backup blade in his vest, and as he twisted to bring the firearm back to bear on my chest, I gained control of the weapon and fired a single decisive shot to stop the threat. Miller slumped over, the fight drained out of him. I immediately secured the firearm, cleared the chamber, and placed it on the hood of my truck. I raised my hands high above my head as the sirens began to wail in the distance. The rule of law. The investigation was a landslide of evidence. Brookside was a high-surveillance neighborhood, and my own porch camera had captured the entire sequence of events in 4K resolution. The footage showed Bella lying peacefully on the sidewalk, never moving toward Miller. Miller stepping out of his vehicle, drawing his weapon without provocation, and shooting the dog from 10 feet away. Miller pointing the weapon at me as I attempted to render aid. The struggle and the subsequent self-defense. The police didn't treat me like a suspect, they treated me like a victim who happened to know how to defend himself. Miller was transported to the hospital in critical condition, where he later fell into a deep coma. Bella was pronounced dead at the scene. I sat on the curb, her blood on my hands, as the forensic team marked the shell casings. The silence I had moved here for was finally gone, replaced by the clinical efficiency of a crime scene investigation. The fall of the kingdom. As the criminal investigation deepened, the district attorney's office executed a search warrant on Linda Harper's home and office. They found a digital manifesto of malice. Emails between Linda and Miller revealed a premeditated plan. If the dog is out, find a reason to feel threatened. We need a permanent solution to the Vance problem. The board will back your story. Just make sure it looks like you were protecting the children. I want him broken, Miller. If he loses the dog, he loses his anchor. Then he'll sell. Linda Harper was arrested in front of the entire HOA board. She was charged with conspiracy to commit a violent crime, aiding and abetting, harassment, and civil rights violations under the ADA. The HOA itself was gutted by civil litigation. A wrongful death suit, combined with claims of negligent hiring and intentional infliction of emotional distress, resulted in a settlement exceeding $250,000. The association, unable to secure insurance and facing a mass exodus of residents who were horrified by Linda's actions, dissolved within 6 months. The final message. The story of Brookside is a cautionary tale of imaginary authority. Linda Harper believed that a title and a set of bylaws gave her the power of life and death. She believed that fear was a legitimate tool of governance. She was wrong. Miller survived his injuries but woke to a mountain of felony charges, including aggravated animal cruelty and impersonation of an officer. He will likely spend the next 2 decades in a state facility. Linda Harper was sentenced to 12 years. I still live in the same house. The neighborhood is quiet again, truly quiet this time. I have a new dog now, a pup named Echo. We walk the same sidewalk where Bella died, past the empty house where Linda used to live. Power without legitimacy is just a costume, and when that costume is used to justify cruelty, the law is a very heavy hammer.